All right, welcome to Bathurst, this week's Skip Barber race. We're going to take it a hot lap. I did a 2:32.532, which I think can be improved on quite significantly. I think 2:31s are very doable. So let's take a look at the lap. So from the start, we have a fairly short run to turn one. Turn one does bunch up, especially in the first lap, but it's vital to get out of there pretty cleanly with a good exit speed because there's a long uphill after the first turn, and you want to try to get as much momentum without compromising speed too much. The approach to turn one is pretty straightforward, stay to the right side, and we really want to start slowing down around this 50 marker. It's going to be a downshift twice to second gear. You want to turn in fairly early and then get on the gas a little bit before the apex. So we want to start braking as we hit the 50 marker here. And it's going to be a late turn in, 2 shifts down into second gear. And ideally, you're getting on the gas slightly before the apex. As we can see here, I kind of went a little bit too wide on this lap. You want to try to get on and maximize your exit speed. You can take this corner pretty wide. The curb is safe, even that green part is safe. You do want to get back on before you hit the dirt here because you will get an off track. But again, the point of this whole corner is to try to maintain as much exit speed as possible because you've got this long run uphill. And if you're not drafting behind somebody, it's very easy to lose a lot of time heading up this hill. Otherwise, it's pretty standard. Shift up all the way up to 5th gear. You may want to wait to shift into 5th, pull 4th as much as you can, basically over the crest of this hill, and then get into 5th on the downside of it as you approach turn 2. Turn 2, another tricky one, especially on cold tires. There's not a lot of camber to it. So early on, it's going to be slippery. And if there's traffic, people jockey for position here because they've been coming up the hill drafting. So it's another one where we start slowing it down at the 50. We don't apply too much brake here, and it's going to be 2 downshifts into 3rd. Again, carrying as much momentum as possible through this turn because we got another uphill coming up right after this. Really, the whole section from turn 1 all the way to the top of the hill is all about momentum. So we start slowing down at the 50, shift down twice, and try to get on the throttle again pretty early. Stay off the curb because that'll just push you wide. Hug that white line. You see I committed to basically 100% throttle right about at the apex. Using the whole track. You don't want to get too much over the outside curb because it can bottom out your car and that'll just slow you down. But it's not the worst thing in the world. Again, continuing up the hill, got to maintain speed. So it's important to try to get as much drive out of turn 2 into through here. Now this section, you don't have to hug the inside wall too tight because you're going to be setting up to the right immediately after this for a pretty important and tight left turn. So as you kind of hold maybe a quarter of the way across the track there, you start to drift out for the braking zone here. It's one shift down to second gear, very easy on the brake just to start that rotation. Then we kind of coast in towards the apex. You want to be as tight as possible to this wall, which is scary. I could have been much tighter here. You can definitely go inside of the white line. But really, this corner, you need to carry as much speed as possible and do it as smooth as possible because, again, you have another big uphill right after this, and you can very easily lose half a second through this next section just by messing up this corner slightly. So get the braking sort of done early to get that turn in. If we take a look at kind of where we started braking, about here, and a lot of it is muscle memory. Again, I could have been even further to the right here. It is a lot flatter on the outside, so getting that brake and turn in done there is a little bit easier because it sets you up nicely for the apex into the next corner. And then as we approach the apex, again, committing to 100% throttle, second gear, and power through as much as possible. Let the car drift. Not too far. There's a fairly big bump here, which I think I hit, which caused me to shift into third. I would have held second a little bit longer, but that's okay. Using the whole track here. One important element through this uphill section, it's pretty easy to just go full throttle. You're going to go into third. You're going to shift into fourth as you crest. But you want to maintain a nice smooth flow through here so that you don't scrub a lot of speed. It's very easy to kind of weave across the track and scrub a lot of speed and lose time that way. So try to be smooth, let the car kind of drift from one side of the track to the other. Again, fourth gear through here. This whole next section is going to be full throttle. On cold tires, you may need to lift a little bit, but once the tires are up to temperature and pressure, it's just full throttle throughout. Again, kind of keep it to the inside here. I went a little wider than necessary through there. Kind of staying off the curbs because they will push you to the outside. Setting up here, you do want to kind of go as far out as you can because the next turn and kind of flowing through it without hitting the curbs too much can be a little tricky sometimes. So no slowing down, turn in just after you start getting on this curb here, and kind of, because it's blind, it's a little hard to see where you're going to go, but as soon as you crest, you can kind of see that inside curb there, and we're aiming for that. We don't want to get on it because then it can push us too far to the outside, and that outside curb is high, and that can mess you up all sorts. So again, full throttle, kind of ride right along the inside of that curb. If you do get on the outside curb, stay straight, because as soon as you start turning, you can lose the back pretty easily. And definitely if you hit that grass, you'll see a lot of crashes here. People might graze that grass and it'll throw them into the opposite wall, so always be careful here. And obviously this next downhill section is something the track is famous for, and it's really hard, but if you get it right, it is great. I mean, it's one of the best feelings, I think, in sim racing. So we set up really wide as we start turning in before we go under the banner here. Still full throttle, full commitment, up until about this section here is where I let off the throttle, and we start braking just after that orange transition on the sidewall there. So I get off the throttle, kind of coast in, and start applying our brakes once we straighten the car out. It's vital to keep the car straight through here before braking. Otherwise, you're going to lose the back end. You're just going to fly. I mean, you're going to see cars in the wall through this section. So this downhill, I approach it with basically two braking zones. There's one here, and we're going to go across that next curb. When we do, we're going to lift off the brake and then apply the brake again after we cross into the next right-hand turn up there. So we apply some brake here, about 55% max. We let it straighten out, and we shift down to third. Then we kind of ride over this inside curb with no brake, and then we brake again as soon as we get off that curb, straightening out into this next right-hander and downshifting into second. So if we take a look at that again, it's kind of a two-part brake zone, right? So we lift here, we brake down to third, coast over the curb, slow down, more braking, down to second gear, and then back on the throttle pretty early. I graze the brake here. You don't have to. The key here is to get a good turn in and point kind of towards the inside, almost as if you're going to go hit it. The further inside you can get the car, the better it is. And that drop is going to push you out. So even though it looks like you might hit the front left onto the wall, you probably won't. Because again, this drop is going to want to send you to the right side. The more you can set up left, the more traction you'll have and the ability to kind of get on the gas hard. It is important to get on the gas because if you're not on the gas, you actually lose more traction by just kind of sliding on the tires to the outside. So as soon as you're sort of aligned, you want to kind of get on the gas to ride through this dip. And then 100% throttle commitment all through these sections. Keep it tight. I go up to fourth gear here. 100%. And then I kind of look at this. I do lift a little bit to get that turn in to stay to the right side of this track. And I look at that sewer grate kind of here on the right. And that's about where I start braking. So I lift and brake just before there. Before I approach this Falcon banner on the right side, already braking about 40%. It's very easy to slide through the section, so don't stomp on the brake. You want to get down to first gear, kind of keep it to the right, but again, coasting. You don't want to come to a stop because you have a long straightaway right after this, so you want to kind of maintain as much momentum as possible. First gear, bring it all the way to the left side, turning in, and I like to get on the gas basically where this wall rises up. So you see that step up in the wall. That's where we're back to 100% throttle, keeping it super tight, using the whole track, and exiting, and big long straightaway here. This is one of the fastest sections you're going to go through on a Skippy, well over 200K, especially if you're drafting. This is another big passing zone. Okay, this next right-hander is full throttle. I actually set up way too far left. There's no reason to go into that extra track area on the left side of the white line. No need to be out here. You can keep it pretty tight and still maintain full throttle. All right, this last set of turns pretty tricky because you're carrying a lot of speed, so it's deceiving as to how much you need to slow down. I start to brake right around this 100 marker, and I go down to third gear. You can go in second. I try to keep it in third because it forces you to sort of maintain more momentum through the section without slowing down as much. Second gear, you're going to get a lot more engine braking, so it's harder to keep your speed up. But it is very easy to, one, hit the inside curb, which will push you outside, and then two, if you get pushed outside or end up outside, there's a definite off track. That happens pretty easily because the track is fairly narrow there. So I start turning in just after that 50 marker. Again, down to third gear. Keep it tight. I mean, a little bit of curb is okay, but ideally you want to just miss that curb because it will push you wide. And you want to stay off the grass. I mean, a little bit of grass here is okay. Too much, you're going to get a 1X. You want to stay off the grass. Exiting here, you can commit again 100% throttle all the way through this right-hander. You can use the curb. Again, be careful with the grass. Stay out of the grass. Up to fourth gear. as we approach the last turn, which again is tricky because you're coming downhill. I start slowing down about 75, right? So somewhere between the 50 and the 100 here. You can see sort of some dirty part of the track right ahead of us here. So sometimes push it all the way to that, but a little bit basically before that pole on the right side is when we start slowing down. Down to second gear, kind of keep it as far to the right as you can. Early turn in. Get as close to the curb as possible. Try to apex early to get back on the gas. And then it's just a short run, a bumpy run to the finish line. It's hard to overtake, so you want to try to get it right so nobody can pass you either. And that's a lap.